Thank you very much, Madam Davis, Mr. Christopherson, Mr. Emanuelidis. Thank you once again for the invitation. My thanks also to Herman Van Rompuy, who was recently in Zagreb, and when was the right moment to agree that next time I come to Brussels that I should also participate in one of the EPC events as one of the most influential think tanks in Brussels for many years. It is my great pleasure to address you today and share some of the views of my country regarding the current challenges of European Union as well as its future direction. This conference is coming really at the right time, 2 days before the informal EU Leaders Summit, which will be held in Sibiu, but also before we adopt and prepare a new strategic agenda for the European Union, just 2.5 weeks ahead of the European Parliament elections. Both of those two events will have significant impacts on how our Union will look like and how our policies will be shaped through our collective decision-making in the next 5 years and beyond. Discussion on the future of Europe over the last 2 years has been intense, inspiring, and relevant. The initial European Commission's roadmap towards a more united, stronger, and more democratic Europe was complemented last week by its latest contribution for Sibiu from President Juncker and his team. I thank him for their efforts and also for the whole mandate of almost 5 years now. I also congratulate the EPC for the set of recommendations for defining EU priorities in 2019-24 in the paper or the book which you compiled called Yes, We Should, and it is an excellent input for today's debate. I would like to use this opportunity to share my views on future of Europe as the Prime Minister of Croatia, the most recent member of the European family, joined only 6 years ago, with a big responsibility and strong motivation to take over the EU presidency at the beginning of 2020, where we will have for the first time opportunity to steer our Union in the very demanding times. The strategic decisions we will take and significant political developments over the next few months will undoubtedly determine my country's EU presidency program and priorities, which will also be presented here in Brussels in approximately 6 months from today. A few words on Croatia. Croatia's journey to the EU has been very specific. It was marked by devastating and costly war and aggression against our country in the early 90s. It was followed by vast reconstruction and parallel transformation of both our society and our economy, accompanied by the transformative power of the European Union accession preparations. And although our economy is still catching up, Croatian people understand that the European Union brings benefits to the everyday life and that this membership was a positive event in the course of Croatia's last, now almost 30 years of our independence. Our macroeconomic indicators are positive. We have a GDP growth between 2.5% and 3% and continuous low inflation rates. For 2 years in a row, we register surpluses in our budget, first time after 20 years. Employment, wages, pensions, social fare, benefits, exports and investments are all rising, while in parallel, taxes, public debt and interest rates are being steadily reduced. Structural reforms are ongoing and the absorption of the EU funds is constantly increasing. We exited the excessive deficit procedure in 2017. We exited the excessive macroeconomic imbalances in 2019, and we have regained our investment grade of the credit rating by S&P also a month and a half ago. This was achieved in the last 2.5 years in the mandate of my government, which was, as you may recall, elected on a clearly pro-European platform as a part of my party's belonging to the EPP family. Being for the first time at the helm of the European Union, it will be an important reaffirmation of our strategic European choice but also a chance to shape, together with our partners, a more agile, coherent, and outward-looking European Union, fit to proactively tackle all the challenges ahead. And these challenges are indeed many. The entire world is going through a long period of uncertainty, and the future of Europe in the context of Brexit, challenges posed by migration pressures or by the proliferation of misinformation will depend on the answers that we will be able to find together in the Union. All of these three elements created unprecedented consequences for the political architecture of the EU member states, all of them combined. Will we be able to find ways to improve the security of our citizens and the protection of our borders, while at the same time staying true to our European values and to preserve freedom of movement? Will we be able to preserve the employment and income levels despite the increasing worldwide competition and the ongoing fourth industrial revolution and widespread automation, digitalization, and artificial intelligence it brings? Will we be able to increase economic inclusion, preserve affordable healthcare, and further reduce both social and territorial inequalities despite the aging population challenge? Will we be able to increase our competitiveness globally and at the same time ensure a sustainable development and preserve the environment for us and our children by redoubling our efforts to fight climate change and putting in place a resource-efficient circular economy? And finally, will we be able to find more inner strength to overcome our differences or divisions and build consensus needed to speak with one powerful European voice, as expected from a global actor and the world's second economy? All these challenges and many others require not less Europe, but more Europe, because none of them can be addressed and resolved by single member states on their own. This is why the European Union should strive to be, in my view, agile and not fragile, together and not apart, outward and not inward-looking. What do I mean by agile and not fragile? For me, this is the European Union which is able to anticipate key internal and external challenges and other changes, and to have prompt, effective, and bold responses, fully fit for purpose and addressing our citizens' needs and concerns. For me, this is the European Union, which is a leader that shapes policies, not only reacts to events, and that has efficient decision-making processes. An EU that ensures internal security, effectively manages migration, preserves our social model, strengthens the single market, promotes greener energy and better connectivity, deepens and extends the Eurozone with a well-balanced budget providing an added value to the development of the member states. One of the biggest concerns of European citizens is their security. People are afraid of cross-border threats, terrorism, violent extremism, organized crime, cybercrime. Facing them, no single state is able to defend itself properly and fully. So cooperation and redoubling of our efforts is key. The best measure of our success will be the level of security our European citizens feel across the European Union in comparison to many other places in the world. Croatia has also an important role to play in that regard. We have already deployed more than 6,500 police officers at our borders, non-EU, non-Schengen borders, with our neighbors, along the longest eastern border with the non-EU states. It will be probably difficult for you to imagine, but the length of the border that Croatia has combined with Serbia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Montenegro is longer than the Finnish-Russian border. It doesn't look at first glance when you think of the map, but that is an incredible fact, so it's more than 1,350 kilometers long. In this way, we are preventing the illegal migration on the Western Balkans' Eastern Mediterranean route. Therefore, I strongly believe that Schengen must fully function and include Croatia, Romania and Bulgaria, in line with the evaluation of the European Commission. This is important for the entire EU, which will be more secure with an extra layer of protection on its external border. Reforming the common European asylum system is priority in a way that no member state is put in difficulty because of its geographical location. At the same time, we must continue effectively addressing the root causes of irregular migration, most notably from Africa and Asia. Strengthening partnerships and alliances with relevant partner countries is key, and we should use all the instruments in our policy box available. Solidarity should remain one of the key pillars of our action, while taking into account individual capacities and specific situation of every member state. Despite critics, Europe is home to the most equal societies in the world, with the highest level of life quality. Still, we need to continue fostering dialogue with social partners to enhance social cohesion throughout Europe, always bearing in mind to avoid a social fracture. The European Pillar of Social Rights will contribute to further development of a fair labour market and a fair social security system. We need to address the increasingly negative demographic trends in Europe, as Pope Francis has emphasized just recently during his visit to Bulgaria, through active and flexible employment policies, health, welfare and social protection services, and gender equality policies. Of the demographic difficulties, we in Croatia are fully aware and are trying to address these issues basically every day. A strengthened internal market will be crucial for our competitiveness and growth. We should keep eliminating barriers and preserving a level playing field, with more swiftly adapting to new challenges such as fast technological development in digital era. Its full potential should be used to create modern jobs, especially for young people, accompanied by modern education systems and high-quality vocational training. Digital and transversal skills like communication, language, and creative skills will be vital for adapting the jobs and the education system to the labor market of the future. The world is already 1 degree warmer than 70 years ago, and since oil, coal and gas will continue to meet most of the world's energy demands by 2040, we need to reduce our CO2 emissions in concert. Europe, already a world leader in renewable energy, needs to take the lead in finding solutions to global warming. Thus, we need to continue building our energy union and ensuring our citizens' access to sustainable, secure, and affordable energy. Strategic energy projects aimed at diversification and security of supply will be key. In that regard, my country is giving its contribution by building a strategic liquefied natural gas terminal in the northern Adriatic that will create an alternative supply route. At the same time, we need to enable the transition to the low-carbon economy through effective implementation of the Paris Agreement. Transport connections, especially railways, as the most energy-efficient land transportation, will play an equally key role for our sustainable development. In Croatia, connectivity is most visibly symbolized by the EU-funded construction of the Pelješac Bridge, connecting the Dubrovnik area of Croatia with the rest of the country, and with the European Union, which will be a perennial legacy of our first 7 years of the membership in the European Union. The euro, which has become the second currency in the world and the worldwide symbol of the European Union, needs to be further deepened and extended. For Croatia, joining the Eurozone is a clear objective. We agreed to it when we joined the European Union back in 2013. My government is implementing, together with the Croatian National Bank, the strategy for the adoption in euro, and the first next step is going towards the direction of joining the European exchange rate mechanism too. More agile EU will require adequate financial resources in order to be able to deliver on all the promises to our citizens and continue building sustainable and credible policies we need to agree on a well-balanced multi-annual financial framework. This means we need to find the right balance between a more modern and innovative financing of policy areas such as research and innovation, digital, circular economy, and tackling climate change and environmental degradation, and a more traditional financing of transport and energy, infrastructure, or agriculture or regional development. For Croatia, as for most Central and Eastern European countries, eliminating inequalities between, let's say, the Western and the Eastern Europe, or the older members and the newer members, means still more cohesion, more convergence, and more catching up. And this should be, in our view, very much represented in the heart of the future multi-annual financial framework. We intend to promote this objective during our presidency. What do I mean by together and not apart? For me, this is the European Union, which is not only the sum of its members, but a union that pools their individual strength in a joint power for the benefit of all. Our sovereignty is actually strengthened by being members of the Union. It has now become fashionable to speak about the disunity of the Union, so much so that the perception is that the EU is more divided than ever before. The perceived divisions between East and West, North and South, old and new members, members of the Eurozone and non-members, net contributors and net recipients of EU funds, not to mention the Brexit, difficult consensus on some issues in the foreign policy, are weakening the perception of the Union. Although many decisions are reached by consensus and compromise is often found in the Council or in trialogues, our divisions are always more in the focus of the public eye. This means that if we manage to overcome our differences, and if we continue building a strong culture of compromise in an inclusive, faster way, we will be stronger on the international political, economic, trade, security, and sustainable development scene. This means striking the right balance among the biggest member states and those who are smaller. Fighting populism is perhaps one of the key objectives across the member states of the European Union. In this way, we have to be, in today's technological circumstances, better equipped to fight this phenomenon. The European Union has always had its opponents. Today, the rise of populism, helped by new technologies and misuse of social media on many occasions, poses a serious threat to the functioning of European but also national democratic institutions. The current incarnation of European populism is riding high on amplifying economic crisis, on exaggerating threats to our identity, and confrontation with allegedly alienated political elites. These are the three elements you can hear across the board in our member states, and it has certain echo within the electorates. Therefore, our task is to communicate better the objective facts and not allow different movements to use modern technologies targeting especially the younger voters and younger population. This, of course, is being done in the context where more than ever the bulk of information available to all of us is unprecedented and has no comparison in the history of the world. Since democracy is based not on the opinion of the best informed, but of the more numerous, one of the most important challenges for our democracies in the European Union is about how to ensure that all citizens can form their opinion on the grounds of verified and relevant information. So we should develop new methods to prevent disinformation that are harming our democracies in the first place and consequently the European project. This means that we should be louder and clearer in explaining values of the European project, and we should reach out to all the parts of our societies, carefully listening to the concerns of our citizens. This is especially important on the eve of the European elections, in which many of the parties who have clearly anti-European objectives are hoping to gain a certain advantage in the composition of the new European Parliament compared to what they had before. Numerous challenges and threats require a stronger, more engaged and more assertive role for the EU at the global scene. The commitment to multilateralism and the rules and values-based international order founded on the respect of peace, human rights, democracy, international law and the rule of law is a key investment into strengthening the role of the Union. We will also need to come closer in issues regarding defense, focusing on better spending of the investment resources in that area and greater interoperability of our militaries. What do I mean by outward and not inward looking? This means the European Union, which is not fearful and inward-looking community, but a confident, attractive and outward-looking union recognized worldwide as a high standard setter. Open to global trade. The globalization of the economy has brought many opportunities to the European Union, and our member states, and a significant part of our growth is the direct consequence of the Union's economic openness. Even though trade defense instruments have been modernized, we need to keep ensuring a level playing field in global trade in order to respond more effectively to unfair trading practices so as to better protect our jobs, businesses and industry. Regarding an issue that is logically close to Croatia, and that is the enlargement policy of the European Union, we feel it represents one of those policies that embodies the power of attraction of our Union, and it has indeed, where it was realized, extended the zone of stability and economic growth. I saw this personally at the meeting in Warsaw last week, where I was together with other prime ministers of the 13 recent member states, 10 from 2004, 2 from 2007, and Croatia from 2013. And there was a unison analysis that all of our states now look much better, 15, 12 or 6 years within the EU, than any of our economies or societies looked before we joined. 2 days earlier, I was at a summit organized by the German Chancellor and the French President in Berlin, where the Western Balkan countries gathered, and where you could feel that all of the 6 countries in the immediate Croatian neighborhood would like to join. They strive for better context of their development, and that is within the European Union. However, it will take a while until the conditions are met, but position of my country and my government is clear. The open door policy of the European Union, despite all the carefulness and cautiousness, should remain. Because if we are too hesitant, too distant, too much waiting-oriented, other powers will not be distant, will not be hesitant, will be proactive in the same region, which is clearly surrounded by the members of the European Union. That's why this transformative power of the Union should always be borne in mind when we discuss the fulfillment of the criteria and keep all the countries always assessed by their individual merits. Croatia will host, actually a year from today, a summit between the EU and Southeast Europeans or Western Balkan countries exactly 20 years after the Zagreb summit, which was held in 2000, at the time the EU of 15, that has opened the European perspective also to my country. And we feel this is an added value we can bring during our presidency. Throughout the European neighborhood, to the east and the south, meaning Mediterranean and the eastern neighborhood, we face major security and political challenges, really major challenges. Whether it's active or frozen conflicts or potential sources of irregular migration. We should be active and dynamically engage into solving politically and diplomatically problems of many times unpredictable world, which is just in our immediate neighborhood. There is no space for turning our head away. Finally, I would like to stress that everything we do on the European level should be oriented towards the benefit of our citizens and in order to address their concerns. They have to be in the center of our action. That's why my friend Manfred Weber, who is campaigning for the EPP family, has put in the center of his action the power of the people by echoing the needs and the expectations of the majority of the Europeans. Our citizens want security, predictability, and prosperity. They also want efficiency from national, EU, but also local institutions and levels of government. They demand responsible acting and tangible results. For this, we need to act with optimism in a strong and proactive union, which combines well the interests of the member states and all of us together where we belong by our own will and our conviction that this historical and continental peace project is the right place for the development of our societies and our citizens. I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much indeed, Prime Minister. Thank you so much. Please do make yourself comfortable for that very clear and far-sighted vision of where we need to go. You identified there very clearly your priorities and some of those big challenges. I'm really echoing that paradox of the together and not apart. How do we restore that spirit of compromise that you talked about so eloquently? Any quick questions for the Prime Minister before we move on? While you are thinking, yes, I see one here. Could you introduce yourself? And please be brief, sir. Helpful if you stand up so he can hear you.
Prime Minister Nicholas White from APCO Worldwide, but speaking in a personal and I hope friendly capacity. Thank you very much for a really interesting presentation, and I'm sorry for drilling down into one local detail in your own environment. You referred to the Berlin conference last week, at which it was hoped by a lot of people that we might see a breakthrough in the discussions between Serbia and Kosovo. And I appreciate very much that this isn't your direct responsibility, but I think it is your direct interest, and I'd like to hear how you think that might progress.
Okay, let's take that straight away, Prime Minister.
One by one?
Yeah, so we'll do quick ones, yeah.
Thank you very much.
It's on. You just speak.
Thank you very much, Nicholas, for this question. Indeed, there were good attempts in Berlin in order to, I would say, arrive to a more normalized state of play of relations between Serbia and Kosovo. However, no major progress was attained at that meeting, but it was, I would say, a contribution to clearly identify what is for both Kosovo and Serbia. In my view, this dialogue should continue. The problems we faced over there was the issue of the tariffs that Kosovo has vis-à-vis Serbia, but also vis-à-vis Bosnia and Herzegovina. And at the same time, the expectations of Kosovo and not at the same time willingness of Belgrade to recognize it. So these two elements were really the firm positions that, in my view, prevented any major progress. But it is clear if the both countries are keen to continue their European path, these two issues should be addressed in as much as possible consensual manner. Thank you.
Anja Milevska, I'm from the Macedonian news agency, MIA. North Macedonia is expecting to start negotiations this year and a formal date in June. I know that Croatia is a big supporter of enlargement. Are you going to help North Macedonia in any way at the next council to convince friends primarily to start the negotiations with North Macedonia?
Thank you.
Well, all of our friends in now North Macedonia are fully aware of how much we supported their European path. It should be noted for those who are not familiar with details, but actually Macedonia concluded the Stabilization and Association Agreement even before Croatia. They actually initialed their agreement, SAA, on the margins of the Zagreb summit 19 years ago. So if there is one country that understands the mood and is firmly convinced that after the agreement between Greece and Macedonia to change the name, I think they deserve a step forward. And we will do our best to support this direction. First, we will see what the Commission will recommend, as far as I understand, at the end of May.
Thank you. Prime Minister, if I could ask you just a couple of questions by way of closing. One links to this question of ambition versus realism, as you meet with the other EU leaders this week. Herman Van Rompuy, in his intervention there, he talked about we need gradual steps. He said it's not time for a major European offensive, but they mustn't be small steps. And he talked in the forward to Challenge Europe about that balance between ambition and realism. Where do you think we should strike it? You talked about a stronger and more proactive union. How ambitious should we be? How ambitious can we be?
Well, I think we need to find solutions for two critical elements, and I think they are essential. One is that we see how to address the burden sharing on the consequences of the migratory and refugees wave. This issue is still unresolved, which means the European asylum system, which means the reflection of what to do with the Schengen. My country wants to join Schengen, but the Schengen needs to function as well. This is one of the elements where we should really attain serious progress. Second is to focus on the strong use of the redistributive power of the European budget to our competitiveness, to our employment, to youth, research innovation, but also work on the social cohesion. We must focus on that. We know what are the exclusive shared competencies, but still there are expectations. And if there is one dossier, I would really be happy that there is some room for aid for many of the countries in the future 7-year budget. That would be the demographic policies. This is make it or break it for all of our nations. Not so long run, I would say.
So those two things, you said at the beginning that your presidency inevitably will be driven by events and by the outcome of this debate that you will begin in Sibiu about the strategic agenda. But for you, at the end of your 6 months in charge, personally, what do you hope to be able to say about how we have moved forward? It will be, of course, a year from now. We'll have the elections, the institutional change behind us. Where do you hope we'll be by this time next year?
Well, in my view, there are two major elements which could be a differencia specifica of Croatian presidency. One, in terms of timing, we should conclude the negotiations on the 7-year budget. Yep. If we give our contribution to that exercise, it's already a huge success. And second is this Zagreb summit I would like to organize, not to create miracles or false expectations, but to have a realistic assessment what the countries which are already basically in, not formally, but they're there, can expect during the next decade. And I know what they expect, just we need to do it smartly in a way that everybody is happy. These two things, in my view, given all the usual elements that every presidency puts in
would already be a lot, indeed.
Would already be a lot, and for the first time, it's not bad.
Indeed. We wish you all the best with that presidency. We wish you all the best in Sibiu. Ladies and gentlemen,
thank you very much.
Will you join me in thanking the Prime Minister very much indeed? Thank you, sir. We are very honoured that you could join us in such a busy week and monumental week for the European Union. So, we've had there, from the Prime Minister and from Herman Van Rompuy, their idea of what the challenges are, what the priorities should be, both in terms of policy priorities, but also what tools, what instruments we need to use to deliver on those priorities. And what we're going to do in our two panels this afternoon is we're first going to focus on the what. What should the EU's strategic priorities be? And then in our second panel, we will talk about the how to do it. How do we manage to use the instruments and tools that we already have at our disposal in order to deliver? How do we make sure the strategic